Welcome to the 30th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, the day of the Lord. And the word of the Lord came to me, again the Logos, pros me legon, ie anthropou, son of man. Prophetev son, we have a prophesy, comes from that transliteration. Prophesy and say, in the imperative, thus says Adonai, the Lord, oh, the day, for the day of the Lord is near. Even the day of the Lord approaches. It will be a day of cloud and a time of nations. Interesting, in a book, entities of the book of Revelation, turn the light on here, that we've shown you the last couple of chapters. It has a section on a day, and it's right down here on day, and there's one's day of the Lord that are mentioned. They're all in the Old Testament. The day of the God Almighty is the only one that's in Revelation. But I put these quotations here because it could be related to that day of God Almighty, which is in Revelation 16:14. But in Joel 2:11 it says, "For great is the day of the Lord, exceedingly apparent, and who will be fit for it?" And then Zephaniah 1:14, "For the great day of the Lord is near and near very quickly. The sound of the day of the Lord is ordered up, harsh and bitter. That day is a mighty day of anger, a day of affliction and distress, a day of misery and extinction, a day of dimness and darkness, a day of cloud and fog, a day of trumpet and a cry against the fortified cities and against the high corners." Then in Malachi 4:5 it says, "And behold, I will send to you Elijah the prophet before the coming day of the Lord, the great and apparent." And in Joel 3:14-15, "Sounds resounded in the valley of punishment, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of punishment. The sun and the moon shall darken, and the stars shall let down their brightness." And finally, in Amos 5:20, "Is not darkness the day of the Lord, and not light, and dimness not having brightness in it?" It's interesting that this day of the Lord is only basically mentioned in the Old Testament. It seems like it's almost just for the Jews. Maybe the Christians, believers of Jesus Christ, will be taken and will not experience the day of the Lord. I hope that's the case. But anyway, it continues, "And a sword shall come against the Egyptians." Now, I was thinking, well, now that could be a split right here, because the day of the Lord, now all of a sudden, "and a sword shall come against the Egyptians." It could be a separate thing completely from the day of the Lord, or it could be tied into the day of the Lord. I'm really not sure, but certain things in this chapter sound like it could be towards the end, and other things something that was going to happen close to when Ezekiel was told. But anyway, it mentions the sword shall come against the Egyptians, and there will be a disturbance in the land of Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was south of Egypt, and in between is the Sudan today, the country of the Sudan, and then Ethiopia. Now, and then Eritrea, a country, was split up from Ethiopia, was next to Ethiopia, called the Horn of Africa. And now, whether the Ethiopian Sudan was all one at this time, I'm not really sure. May have been split like in the 19th, 20th century. But anyway, it says, "And they shall fall, being slain in Egypt." And we went through in the last chapter all the things of Egypt, and sounded like the future because of these 40 days that they're going to be taken away. And they are 40 years. "And they shall take of her abundance, and her foundations shall be cast down." So that's with Egypt. And then it adds these other countries, which are all today pretty much around. These areas were known, and they're all Muslim, including Egypt. Persians, which is northern Iran that time, and Cretes. Well, Crete's not. That's actually Orthodox island in the Mediterranean. The Lydians, and that would be the western area of, the western area of Turkey, where the 7 churches were mentioned, where they were located. The Libyans, which is west of Egypt, Libya, and the Ethiopians, again, south of Egypt, and all the intermixed peoples, and from out of the sons of my covenant shall fall by the sword with them. So I don't know where that has ever happened with all these countries we're going to fall. Now, does it mean they're going to fall with them by joining them, or are they going to be sons of my covenant against them, but they're going to fall in the same battle? That I don't know. Up for interpretation. Thus says Legi Adonai Kyrios. Again, it changes a little here when that thus says Adonai. And the supports of Egypt shall fall, and the insolence of her strength shall go down from Migdol unto Cyrene. Now we have all these locations, and they're all in this map right here. Migdol is up here. Syene is down here. Upper Pathros, and then we'll go into Heliopolis, go into Pelusium, which is Sin. Taphanes is up here. Memphis is right here. So we're going to go through, I'll mention all these places, but I just want to show you, they're basically all in Egypt. You can read about them on Wikipedia if you want to do that. So anyway, from Migdol unto Syene, so the north to the south, they shall fall in her, says Adonai Kyrios. And it shall be made desolate in Egypt, in the midst of places being obliterated. So again, like in the last chapter, it could be in the future. Other places are being obliterated. And her cities will be in the midst of cities being made desolate. And they shall know that I am Kyrios, whenever I shall appoint fire against Egypt. And all the ones helping her shall be broken. In that day shall come forth messengers. Angali, we have the Alpha Gamma Gamma, as I mentioned. Whenever you see that, it has something to do with a message or a messenger, of something spoken. Messengers hastening to obliterate the hope of Ethiopia. Now, I'm not exactly sure that they're going to come to obliterate the hope of Ethiopia. I'm not exactly sure what the hope of Ethiopia is, or they're the hope of the people in Egypt hoping for Ethiopia. I'm not sure there, but again, and there will be a disturbance among them in the day of Egypt. For behold, it is come. Thus says Adonai Kyrios. Now you could say that there, when he has that, well, thus says Adonai the Kyrios, the Lord, and I will destroy the multitude of the Egyptians by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Now he gets down to specifics with the time frame close to the time of Ezekiel, with the Nebuchadnezzar coming, who is king of Babylon. He and his people with him, the pestilent ones from the nations, being sent to destroy the land. Now, I don't think this is an allegory for a future period of time when it says Nebuchadnezzar is coming. And they shall all empty out their swords against Egypt, and shall fill the land of slain. And you can add that to your English derivatives book, travmation, slain. And Nebuchadnezzar did come, or the armies of the Babylonians. Now, whether he actually set foot himself in there is in speculation. But and I will make their rivers desolate. I will render the land by the hand of evil ones, and I will obliterate the land in its fullness by the hand of strangers. I, the Lord, have spoken. And so, again, the rivers, there's mainly the one river is the Nile, but it does go in, splits up into the delta with the different tributaries, if that's what it's talking about. And also, last chapter I said there could be other countries, their rivers, or their helpers, allies, possibly talking about that. For thus says the Lord God, and I will destroy the abominations, idols that is, and I will wrest the great ones from Memphis, and I think the bull was in Memphis. Opis was a god that they had. Now, as the abominations are going to be destroyed, the rulers from out of the land of Egypt, and they will not any longer be any longer. And I will put fear in the land of Egypt, and I will destroy the land of Pathros, which was the southernmost part called Upper Egypt, because it's higher up when the Nile goes downwards into the Mediterranean. And I will put fire upon Tanis, and that was in that area, and I will execute punishment in Diospolis. You can go back to that map, and Diospolis is actually considered Thebes, the city of Zeus. Theospoli. Polis is a city, and Theo generally has to do with Zeus, deity. And I will pour out my rage upon Sin, and that is what is considered today Pelusium, and that was shown on that map. It's up close to the Mediterranean where it pours out. I will pour out my rage upon Sin, Greek, and the strength of Egypt, and I will destroy the multitude of Memphis, and I will appoint fire unto Egypt. And Sin with a disturbance shall be disturbed, and Diaspoli, that's the city, that's Thebes. There will be an inundation, and water shall be dispersed, some type of a flooding, possibly this is all in the future. Young men of Heliopolis, that is a suburb now of Cairo. It was a major area of rule of the ancient Egyptians, now a suburb of Cairo. And Bubastum, which is on the Nile. It was a center of worship for the feline goddess Bast, B-A-S-T. And that one again was up in the lower Nile by the outlet to the Mediterranean, and they'll fall by the sword. And the women shall go into captivity. Epsilon eotani would be is into, and this is in. They will go in captivity in captivity. And in Taphanes, now Taphanes is on the Suez Canal today, and it's on that map up towards the Nile Delta. And in Taphanes, the day shall darken in my breaking there the chiefdoms of Egypt. And the insolence of her strength shall perish there. And Taphanes was all unknown by the time of Strabo, the time of Christ, when the Roman geographer Strabo went there, he was just nothing there. Most of these places were all dirt, all ruins. And the insolence of her strength shall perish there, and a cloud shall cover her, and her daughters shall be led captives. And I will execute judgment on Egypt, and they shall know that I am the Lord. So all these places at that time were all vanished. Now they're being dug up by archaeologists, finding all sorts of things, opening new tombs and finding new places and all sorts of artifacts. Now it changes because it even gives the time of the 11th year in the first month. So again, we're jumping around, and I have back a couple of chapters. I have a list of all the different chapters in the year, so you can see that it's not in chronological order. And it took place in the 11th year in the first month, the 7th of the month. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, Ie anthropu, I broke the arms of Pharaoh Vasileos Aegyptu, Egypt. I broke his arms, and behold, it was not earnestly beseeched to give to him healing, to put upon him a dressing, to be given strength to take hold of the sword. So he was, God broke him. Now, if it's in war or whatever, doesn't say. On account of this, thus says Adonai, behold, I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and I will break his arms, the strong ones and the ones being broken, and I will throw down his sword from out of his hand. And I will scatter Egypt into the nations, and will winnow them into the places. Now, this sounds like the future. This was that I was saying at the beginning. Some things in this chapter sound future, and sometimes some of the things sound like at the time of Ezekiel. And I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon. Now, that would be Nebuchadnezzar. So, again, that could be back at that time. And I will put my broadsword into his hand, and he shall bring it upon Egypt, and shall plunder her plunder, and shall despoil her spoils. And I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and the arms of Pharaoh shall fall. And that's what happened. Nebuchadnezzar came in, defeated Necho. Pharaoh Necho went back into Egypt, and Egypt basically never came out and attacked anybody like that again. And they shall know that I am the Lord in my putting the broadsword into the hand of the king of Babylon. And he shall stretch it against the land of Egypt. And now a lot of this about Babylon against Egypt is not shown in a history that we see. And so that's why a lot of people say, well, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon never really went into Egypt and did all these things. So it could be either it wasn't written down or it's something in the future. Don't know. And I will scatter Egypt into the nations. Now, how much they were scattered, if that happened or if it's still to happen, and shall winnow them into the places, and they shall know that I am Kyrios, the Lord, or Jehovah, Yahweh in the Hebrew. So, interesting chapter of these things. The next chapter we'll be going into is 31. I don't have the title here, so I'm not exactly sure what's in it, but you'll find out when you go into our next chapter, in chapter 31. Hope you'll join us. God bless.